ヨハン・リーベルトさんなら今朝。そうですか。
ロテ。
突然倒れたって聞いたけど、大したことなかった。
Oh, it's serious.
あら、あなたよく図書館に来る。あなたは大学の図書館の司書の。
Maybe that's the bridge I'm looking for.
あの時はどうなるかと思った。あなたの目の前で倒れたの？
Go on, start digging, start digging.
本を探していたの。それで私も一緒に探していて、それで突然？そうなの。
Beautiful stuff again.
叫び声？絵本手に取ってね。こうページをめくっていたら、絵本。
That's right. A picture book. So now, Lotte, I mean, she already had a connection to Johan, right? A colleague, fellow student. But then really quite recently, she met Nina. Okay. So see, last episode, I couldn't quite connect or, find a bridge. This almost immediately kind of gives me a bridge, right? The lady that actually saw it happen, and Lotte. Okay. Now it all kind of, depends on Lotte. If she is going to dig deeper, I'm going to go ahead and assume she is. She's quite the investigator, as I've seen before. At the edge of darkness, you say. Oh yeah, that's not the issue. That's the one, isn't it? A lot of things are out of his control at the moment. In terms of information about him. Now he reacts. A letter bomb? How prevalent are those? I suppose quite a bit at that time. Interesting. Yeah. Oh. I've seen this before. Hindenburg, as in the disaster. Yeah, it's pretty boy indeed. It's kind of similar to the reaction Reichwein got. Oh, look at that. A dark alley within the red light district. And the discards. Oh god, this is so sad, isn't it? Balloons? Oh, to me, it almost kind of feels like a journey into someone's dark mind. Great sound design again. Oh, it's her! I thought she died. Because Reichwein, he was told that she left with, the big guy, and big guy being Roberto, right? Oh, unforgettable face. Okay, I see. I see her play. She's got a sense of humor. If it is indeed the Hindenburg disaster. No, names do matter. The big guy. She has no idea. It's the second time. She has no clue. No clue.
実際大したもんだよ。以前あんたファーレンとかいう若造を連れてきたね。
Yeah, this is blackmail.
まさかその後、本物のシューバルトの息子が現れるとは思わなかった。かわいそうなのはファーレンだ。用済みになった途端すぐ自殺させられる。
She's just laying it out step by step. This is the thing I know, and then this is the thing I know.
2年前実に都合よく死んでくれた。
Oh, how far back does this go, Johan?
別に彼女とそんなに親しくしてたわけじゃない。彼女は町の女じゃない。もう足洗ってたからね。2、3度酒を一緒に飲んだだけさ。酔わせて私がちょいと泣き真似しただけで話すわ。シューバルトとの色恋沙汰。里子に出した息子の。
Yeah, she latched onto that.
ところがあの女殺されちまった。おかげでこっちはマルゴット・ランガーになり変わってシューバルトからごっそりいただいたわけさ。マルゴットが殺された事件、警察は通り魔の仕業ってことにしたがね。まさかこんな計画が進行してたなんて警察は思ってもみなかっただろう。
Yeah, just let her speak.
それにあのリヒャルトとかいう探偵もかわいそうなことしたね。
She's just digging her grave, man. Keeps doing it.
自殺なんかしないで済んだろうに。
I'm actually kind of surprised that she's still alive, though.
はてさて何人やったのやら。
You're about to be another.
さてと、楽しい話はこれぐらいにして交渉ごとに入ろう。
Yeah, it's quite the info dump, but let's get down to business now.
諦めるんだね。いくら出す？
To be honest, I don't feel bad for her. She's not some innocent either.
一番の恐怖って何だ？
You'll find out.
一番暗いところにたどり着いたと。
Oh, you thought?
でもね、その先にもっと暗い闇が見えたんだ。
Ooh. Now, is this recent?
もうやめたんだ。もうシューバルトに興味はなくなった。
Ooh, is that right?
ふざけるんじゃないよ。
There's no reason to lie about that.
もう無駄だよ。僕はいない人間なんだから。
なめるんじゃないよ。あんた出て
Actually, you don't want him to come out. Look at as one door opens, the other one. Yet another Hindenburg disaster upon us. Official confirmation of the big guy.
あんた何よ。
You big dummy.
メルト。
Look at that. Same room, Roberto and Johan. I believe that's the first time. Okay. No gunshot yet.
風船一つくれるかな。
Fusen. I recognize that. This is so trippy, man.
これで薬を買うといい。
I mean, you know, he's not the one pulling the trigger or executing her. And he's been seen by these two others now, but let's talk about it later. Ooh. Oh. Okay, so it's... No, there's two doctors here.
その長い棒みたいなのは。
いや、
But why is he here?
こちらのドクターはそんなに名医なんですか？
So he's heard about this doctor.
このドクターいなかったらここらのアジア人、
あー
特にベトナム人はみんな死んでる。
そうなんですか。
Foreigners, immigrants, perhaps illegals.
じゃないだろう。
え
あんた顔色悪いが怪我人が先だ。
え、いや、私は別に患者じゃないんで。
Okay.
座って待ってなって。
ドクター、ちょっとお聞きしたい。
Let's have a look.
何度言ったらわかるの？外で待ってなさい。
Whoa.
今そんな余裕はないの。
Wow.
女性。しかも。
聞こえないの？出て行きなさい。
She looks quite young.
一体このドクター。
Yeah.
年齢は。
縫合中なんだから邪魔しないで。このクラン家に何かあったらあなたの責任。
Maybe Tenma can assist.
大腿部の刺し傷か。ナイフによるものだな。縫合はかなり綺麗だ。だが、ドレーン管を挿入した方がいい。
横でごちゃごちゃ言わないで。
でなければ早くちゃんとした病院に運んだ方がいい。
I mean,
ちゃんとしたですって
they're coming here for a
ここだって
reason, of
ちゃん
course.
とした。
病院じゃない。見ればわかる。
Wow.
君は本当
Quite
の医者
blunt,
じゃない。
but well, it is a
本
matter
当
of
の
life
病
and
院
death.
に連れて行けるんならとっくに言ってるわ。
Yeah.
ここの人たちはほとんどが不法滞在者か不法入国者よ。
No other option.
本当の病院なんかに行ったらすぐに施設送り本国に強制送還される。ここの人たちがちゃんとした病院に行けないで何人死んでいったと思ってるの。何も知らないで偉そうなこと言わないで。
He kind of knows,
ドレーン
and he
管を
doesn't.
挿入して汚れたナイフで刺された可能性が大きい。ドレーン挿入留置しないと傷の内部で可能性
Interesting
農用形成を起こしてしまう。
music selection
Hi.
for this scene.
1、2針分抜歯して。
And she's got to be mid 20s at most.
よし、うまくいった。
はい。
Tenma
次の患
sensei.
者は誰？
Ah, yeah. He's overworked. I mean, that much is clear if you look at the other room, right? It's kind of like non-stop, essentially. And this is how Tenma can assist. She's a kid.
気がついたか。
Not quite a kid, but okay, maybe early 20s then.
患者に聞いたよ。48時間眠らずぶっ続けで治療してたそうだな。
Wow.
君、いくつだ？
22.
17。
驚いたな。その若さで。まるで本物の開業医並みの。
ここで開業してた医者が道具を置いたまま蒸発してしまって。
道具が揃っていればできるってもんじゃない。どこでこんな技術を覚えた？
Yeah, she knows
父
enough.
が
Ah,
医者だったから。
だった。
父はベトナム人医師で私を連れて東ドイツに留学。ネオナチを名乗るチンピラに
hmm.
父は殺されたの。肌の色が違うだけでただ殺された。
I mean, that much is clear.
私は一人ぼっちになり施設に送られた。
Look at this. Orphanage, another orphan.
ドイツ人の家に引き取られた。でもあの人たちはただの奉仕精神だけで私を引き取ったんだ。かわいそうな黄色い肌の子としてね。だから私は逃げた。私小さい頃からずっと父さんを手伝ってた。
But is that enough to pick?
父さんの残してくれた医学書
Okay,
も
books.
たくさん
Okay.
読んだ。父さんがやろうとしたこと、私が継ぐことに決めたの。
No, she's
それ
courageous.
じゃあ
She is.
次の患者。
あらかた終わったよ。うちに戻ってちゃんと勉強した方がいい。この国は勉強したい人間にチャンスを与える。
Here's the prime example, I suppose. He
あ
speaks
な
from
た
experience.
どうやら本物の医者のようね。素人は引っ込んでろって言いたいのね。
そんなことを言ってるんじゃない。私はただ。
私がいなくなったらここの人たちはどうなるの？ここの人たちを誰が見るの？
Mm.
いや、だから。
Oh, gunshot? Stabbing?
どうしたの？
あたいの紐が
Oh,
突
oh,
然切れてさ。
my pimp.
大丈夫。私に任せて。
I mean, good thing Tenma's here as well, right?
町の娼婦よ。こんな
Um,
目に遭うのはいつもこういう人たちばかり。なんとかしてあげたいけど、こんなの無理よ。私だって限界は知ってる。
okay.
これはお手上げだわ。
最後まで諦めるな。息のある患者だったら最後の最後まで望みを捨てるな。
Look at this.
望みを捨てるな。輸血をしながら緊急回復手術をすれば望みはある。
Transfusing blood.
さあ、始めよう。
She's got quite the teacher, of course. I love
安
this.
心して眠ったようね。
奇跡的に
So hopeful.
骨や小腸、大腸をはじめ消化器には損傷がなかった。
I mean,
損
they
傷脾臓摘出のみで済ん
they really lucked out.
だった。
ドクター・テンマ。ずっとここにいて。
Yeah, he's on a different
私は
path.
君に聞きたいことができたんだ。
Right. Yeah, the reason he's here.
この新聞記事、青いソフィー、またの名を赤い
Ah,
神
okay, so this kind of places
殿。
it.
この娼婦の殺害現場に最初に駆けつけたのは君だって聞いた。
Ah,
ええ。
that kind of makes
その
sense
時の
now.
どんな様子だったか聞かせてくれないか。
頭部を銃で撃ち抜かれていたわ。
They had to call someone like her.
ああいう現場は何度も見たわ。でもあんなの初めて。あの部屋に入った時のあの感じ。
I mean, it's an execution.
強盗でもない、恨みでもない、ただ殺しただけ。
ヨハン、
Yeah, he understands.
闇の中にいると闇に沈み込んでしまう。光を当てるんだ。
Oh. Interesting that he's able to...
しっかり勉強するんだ。君なら必ずなれる。君なら必ずいい医者になれる。
あなたこそ、あなたこそ、
Oh.
もっと深い闇に沈み込んでい
Shit,
く
she's
人みたいに
17
見え
as
る。
well.
また戻ってくるよね、ドクター・テンマ。
Okay, folks, let's get into it. Episode 34, and it's, essentially, the follow-up to one of the most important episodes of the entire anime, of the entire story, right? I believe I said that felt like a significant turning point for the story as a whole, but specifically for the character of Johan. And because of all of the jaw-dropping revelations in that episode, this episode 34, actually kind of had a lot riding on its shoulders because of it being the immediate follow-up, right? So going into it, I'm kind of excited to see the aftermath, the immediate aftermath. Again, I'm not going to, go through all of my talking points from the last episode. I talked quite a bit. That was really quite enjoyable. But yeah, everything I kind of speculated and, different plot points and how they could, maybe deviate at this point on, or from this point on, or from that point on, rather. It was really quite exciting, that episode. And indeed, I do get an immediate aftermath. Ultimately, I think episode 34 actually ends up being a bit more low-key. But, that doesn't mean that there's not enough there to kind of build on some of the things I got in the last episode. I mean, I think there's still quite a bit of substantial plot development here, right? Again, for Johan specifically, as far as his, motives and objectives are concerned, his primary focus in all of this. It seems to have shifted, right? That was the thing I was looking for. How exactly is the character of Johan fundamentally different from this point on, right? From that point on, rather, since that incident. And listen, I speculated about the lady, the young lady at the library who's essentially a part of all of this, right? It's her and Johan. She saw all of this. I feared for her safety. Maybe she might have been found in a ditch or something. I don't know, right? But it didn't go into that direction. Thankfully. I mean, instead, almost immediately in the opening of the episode, she shows up again. But who else shows up? Lotte, right? So there I get that bridge, right? If you'll remember, I'm speaking of the speculation about, okay, this possibly getting out and this possibly getting to people like, Nina, right? Because of course, someone like Nina, his sister, is going to have significant insight into the significance of that book, right? So now the bridge is there, I think, right? And listen, it doesn't even have to be Nina immediately because, listen, I'll be honest with you, I firmly believe that this is going to get to Nina at some point, somehow, right? Now, it feels even more likely, given that Lotte is on the case. And listen, she's going to dig deeper. I'm so sure of it. She's going to, stick to it, rather, now that she has, that input from the lady, right? She told her that, Johan, he started shaking and screaming and all of that. Again, even for Lotte, that's really quite jarring, isn't it? She doesn't know Johan like that. I mean, no one knows Johan like that. Even as an audience member, it's one of the most jarring sights of the entire anime in that last episode. So for Lotte to hear this, and, she's intelligent. She just is, right? She's inquisitive. And like I said, she's quite the investigator as well, right? She's shown already that she's really quite, competent at all of that stuff. If you go back to the Schubert and Carl angle, the mini plot there. And I believe it is part of her major as well. She recently told Nina in the library as they met up, or in the computer lab and at the cafe, So yeah, this is a great little character to have, Lotte, because she facilitates the the movement of this information, the exchange of this information, right? Again, that bridge that I was looking for. But I still fear for Lotte. One of the talking points in the last episode is this idea of Johan not wanting this kind of information getting out there, right? The effects of the book on him and, him blacking out and all of that. Though ultimately, I did reach the conclusion that, yeah, of course, he's not going to be able to completely hide it, because by the time he's going to come to, people that are close to him are going to know about it, right? People like Carl, Lotte even found out, right? Perhaps through Carl. So that aspect of it, he could not control. But yeah, I think Lotte is going to be crucial in this, right? But she has to be careful. She has to be careful. And I think she's going to be crucial because, her digging deeper, her digging in, ultimately, I do believe she is going to get to the book, right? Now that she knows about it, right? Someone as inquisitive as her is going to want to go to the library and check out the book, right? If it's still there. That's another question here, right? I think a lot of my speculation, some of it really feels quite exciting, kind of hinges on the book still being there, right? On that shelf. It could be as simple as Johan just going back or sending someone to go get the book, check it out, and it's not there anymore, and Johan has it. That's a possibility, But I think for narrative purposes and, dramatic purposes and just kind of the plot itself, I think it'd be much more exciting and much more dynamic to the story if indeed the book is still there, because then that allows a lot of really interesting things to play out, right? So yeah, I'm sure, I feel really quite certain that she is going to get to the book if it's still there, and she is going to check it out. And if indeed that does end up happening, then, it opens up a lot of possibilities, right? Because listen, this whole idea of the big old fire, right? The prophecy and all of that was set up all that time ago, and I spoke of it again in the last episode. I mean, listen, I think now, given the recent events, there's yet another reason perhaps to fuel those flames, if you will, right? Because of that damn book from his past that blindsided him, right? That took him to a place. It took him to a dark place, right? And this kind of goes back to that conversation. I mean, more so of him just kind of, just getting his thoughts out there at that time, right? To the Red Hindenburg, the late Red Hindenburg, yet another Hindenburg disaster. Though, quite a surprise to see her alive anyways. I don't see, why exactly she was left alive, right? Maybe it wasn't up to Johan. Maybe it's something Roberto decided on his own. Maybe he'll, have a bit of fun and then, yeah, he'll discard of her. But, I mean, not soon enough, because she's able to write that letter to him. And, I must admit, and again, this is a credit to the voice acting, but Johan reading that letter and, just the laugh, it just felt so authentic, like it's a real person laughing. That's how it felt to me. It didn't feel like, oh, it's a character in a story that's laughing, or, it's an actor. It just felt so authentic to me, because you see, as he's just standing there looking out the window, he's really quite contemplative, really quite introspective at that moment. He's not really responding to Carl. He's just kind of letting Carl speak, much like how he just lets Margot speak later, fake Margot that is, though, of course, through that, extensive info dump, right? There is a bit of new, interesting information that, this goes so much further back, essentially. But, I think I have speculated about that before because, it's Johan. You always have to think about how far back does this go. And I'm speaking of the real Margot, Carl's actual mother, and, Johan playing a part in all of that, a couple of years ago even. But, let's put a pin in that. I'll come back to that. I kind of want to finish up my point about him getting a laugh out of that letter, right? A legitimate laugh out of that letter, something that kind of almost pulls him out of that introspective and contemplative state, right? And even then, even that, it's interesting to see Johan like this, right? Almost expected after, again, the things that happened in the last episode. This is the type of thing I was kind of hoping for and expecting, that, okay, finally, it's giving us something. I mean, it gave us something quite substantial in terms of, something different about Johan. So yeah, I thought it's really great to see this side of Johan now. This shift within, that's really quite clear by the end of this episode, or by the end of that segment. It's essentially A story and B story. You've got Tenma in the second half. Of course, I'll get to that as well. But, let's be honest here. I think the first half of this, the focus on Johan is a bit more gripping, a bit more compelling, rather. Because as far as, Johan's next steps and his trajectory, indeed, it appears that something, was shook loose within Johan to the point that, it's kind of recalibrated his trajectory, right? And, he straight up just tells her, I kind of gave up on that. Schubert's not really my objective anymore, my main objective at least. You see that he's kind of moved on to something else, something that he seems to have remembered really quite recently. So yeah, that book, essentially something I believe to be a blast from his past, it did a number on him. I mean, at this point, I believe that Urasawa has made the significance, the importance of that book crystal clear, or the impact of that book on Johan as a child, rather. Right, to be a bit more specific, I think that's been made crystal clear at this point. And, it has kind of refocused him into a different direction now, right? Or perhaps into a direction that he feels he should have been on. So yeah, I think ultimately these past 2 episodes now, 33 and 34, I think in the grand scheme of things, they could be this really crucial pivot right down the line as well. So, I'm almost kind of bookmarking these episodes because here you see the shift within Johan. Right. And again, within that shift is a shift of objectives and, again, motives and the thing that he feels like dedicating most of his energy to. But in terms of the significance of the book or the things that this book represents, right, to someone like Johan specifically, and perhaps in addition to that, Nina as well. Right. But that's still, a bit of an unknown. But, at this point, I'm assuming that they both know about the book. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about the possibility of Nina potentially getting to learn about the book and the impact or, the reaction it got out of Johan, right? How it affected Johan. And the possibility is there now, right? The possibility is there because Lotte knows about this and she'll dig deeper. And I think it'll get there at some point. Once Margot or the fake Margot, Red Hindenburg kind of shuts up, she just goes on and on and on, of course. Like I said, digging her own grave. Johan finally steps in. He finally speaks his mind. And, the thing he had to say here is really, really quite interesting, isn't it? I thought I had been to the darkest place in the universe, right? But beyond that, I saw even blacker darkness. And, during the episode, I asked the question, is this a recent development, right? I think, I believe at least this is a recent development. And I think this is, of course, directly related to his recent experiences with that book. And I think after that moment and just, Johan's segment as a whole in this episode, I think it's clear that, these repressed memories that came rushing back bamboozled him, right? Transportive as well. It brought him back to a dark time, a really dark time. From the sounds of it. And again, building on some of the speculation from the last episode, indeed, it appears that, this almost kind of feels like something new to him almost, right? That's how repressed all of this was, to the point that he's now saying, beyond that, I saw even blacker darkness, right? This is something he already experienced, but again, it was hidden deep, within his psyche, but it's been brought to light. And, the thing is, I love the contrast there, right? He's speaking of, even blacker darkness and all of that, yet you see in those piercing eyes, that piercing gaze, to me, it almost kind of felt like he's seen the light, that he has seen the light now. He has absolute clarity. That's how I read it, right? It's quite a shot. I think I was probably, basically mimicking the shot itself, because to see Johan like that, I mean, it got the exact same reaction out of me, in that narrow, dark alley within the red light district. It really kind of felt as if, life took a new direction for Johan, right? As he sits there, wide-eyed. But as far as Johan and Tenma's dynamic is concerned, I think Urasawa has taken a really interesting approach there as well. I mean, there's quite a bit to their dynamic, but, this idea of being lost to the darkness. You see that indeed, for some time now, Tenma has been essentially following Johan into that darkness, right? Into the unknown. Accepting it, that this is the path he has to take. But at the same time, he is able to be this, again, shining light, a beacon of hope, from within the darkness for others. So, he of course understands that, this is quite the choice I'm making here, but it's not something I really want for anyone else. And of course, even though Tenma is on a really specific path at the moment, this approach, that's still, within him, it really kind of speaks to Tenma's character as a whole. I mean, the exact line of dialogue there is, if you're in the middle of the darkness, you'll be enveloped by the darkness. Shine a light on it, right? This is him speaking to the really impressive 17-year-old. Listen, even, I suppose I had the exact same reaction as Tenma, 17-year-old. You know, it's really quite impressive. A tad bit, unrealistic, I'd say, but, you know, there's special people out there. It's not that far-fetched, but, you know, it's a case of a really unique individual, right? At 17, to be able to have that kind of resilience and courage in the face of the insurmountable odds. But yeah, you know, I really enjoy this concept or this approach for Tenma's character at this point, you know, that from a place of darkness, he doesn't want anyone else to feel that despair. And they've made it quite clear that he doesn't really want anyone to be caught up in it, right? Be it Dieter, of course, be it Reichwein, Richard, all of these people, right? You know, they made it clear a couple of episodes ago as well that he's kind of almost detaching himself. So yeah, you know, I think it's a really interesting approach to have Tenma kind of being a part of that darkness, if you will, alongside Johan. But again, you know, within that darkness, you know, both of them function in a totally different capacity, right? You know, really quite recently as well. You know, I saw Johan pass on his ideology to these youngsters, right? The ones that he can really kind of mold. And he's guiding them on a really definitive path and mindset, right? Really nihilistic approach. So, you know, one of the key differences there is that for Johan, this is how life is. This is how people are. This is how he looks at life. But then for Tenma, who does find himself, you know, within the same darkness, there's a clear understanding that, okay, there always has to be hope. You know, maybe I'm not on that path anymore, but, you know, for the rest, there has to be hope, right? So he maintains that much. He always maintains that much. And, you know, in the B side or in the B story, you know, Tenma and the young girl, the 17-year-old, you know, that idea, the questions are there, you know, they're present at all times. You know, the value of life, is it equal? Right? You see that Urasawa really likes to approach that quite a bit in the story. And I'm guessing in all of his other works as well. You know, again, I'm quite excited to get to Pluto as well, because, you know, that one is really quite unique. It's in the future. It's set in the future, right? So, you know, the value of life takes a bit of a different turn as well, you know, in a story that is based in the future, given everything else that can be possible in the future. So I'm excited for that down the line, hopefully in 2025. You know, I really do hope to get to it. But I think, you know, the best time is to get to it after Monster. You know, I think one Urasawa joint at a time is probably the best thing. But yeah, you know, this idea of the value of life and if all life is equal, right? I think if you kind of look at it from Johan's perspective and his ideology and all of that, you know, a thing I'm kind of wrestling with is this idea that perhaps, you know, in darkness, everyone is equal. And, you know, if you kind of dig a little bit deeper into the idea of the darkness, you know, a lot of the common things associated with darkness, you know, you could think of purgatory, the afterlife, death. But yeah, to finish up that point, I just think it's such an interesting dynamic. You know, you've got both Tenma and Johan who don't expect to pull themselves out of this darkness, right? Or to be pulled out of it. But, you know, let's kind of go back to Johan and, you know, this idea of him really being quite introspective. Again, you know, reassessing his motives, perhaps, his trajectory, his identity, right? After, again, that incident, the book. The crazy thing is, you know, I speak of identity. Yeah, here you have someone who believes himself to be a non-existent person, right? But, you know, listen, before I go any further, ultimately, that persona, it still exists. It's a person, you know, this individual, Johann Liebert, the person that he is presenting himself as, others know about him, right? You know, Roberta knows about him. The Red Hindenburg knew about him. You know, there's students that do know of this person, his existence, right? At least this, I suppose, persona. So at the most basic level, of course, people know about him. They know him, right? They know that this person is a real person, he exists. But of course, you know, he speaks from a philosophical standpoint, right? Being a non-existent person. But why is that, right? That's one of the big questions here, of course. You know, why is that and how far back does it go? Does it go as far back as his childhood, right? I mean, I think one thing that became clear in the last episode in my discussion is that, of course, you know, this is a lot of childhood trauma being dumped on him, right? That's why I keep using the term bamboozling him, blindsiding him, right? Transportive experience. And of course, you know, if you dig a little bit deeper, just from the surface level, yes, you know, maybe someone can kill Johan, but, you know, the idea here of him being a non-existent person is that, you know, does it matter? again, kind of trying to get into his mind, as as futile as it might be, the attempts of that. But as far as identity is concerned, and this idea of names and all of that, and how Johan makes other people feel sometimes. You go all the way back to the wolf, right? How he isolated him. It all, it's some good stuff here. A lot of good stuff to dig into here. But yeah, you have Margot, the fake Margot, saying things like, it doesn't matter. Names don't matter. As she tosses around a couple of different names. Blue Sophie, I believe. Fake Margot, Red Hindenburg, right? But names do matter. They are intrinsically linked to identity. It's just as simple as that. So, I think something like that, it simply does have to go back to the formative years of a person, right? As a child growing up. So, at this point, I firmly believe that all roads are kind of leading to Johan's childhood, his traumatic childhood, at that, the one that's, again, linked to this book and the things that this book represents to him and perhaps to Nina as well. So, and, on top of that, you see that Johan seems to have a new trajectory in life as well. But again, as far as Johan and this idea of, the really mysterious figure and the non-existent figure and all of that, I love how ultimately it's really quite clear to see that he does like to be observed, especially by someone like Tenma at this point in time, at least, right? It's become so clear that he's been guiding Tenma to a really specific point. And, in the last episode, Tenma gets to that point in the library, and he thinks this is the perfect vantage point, I suppose, to actually execute him. So as mysterious as he is, you see that he almost kind of lays a step-by-step trail for Tenma, right? Even a little bit later, as he asked the young girl, who is the first on scene at Margot's death, the fake Margot, the Red Hindenburg's death, because again, I suppose, real police is not going to be called there, right? She essentially confirms that no, it felt different. And the thing is, Tenma's been around long enough. He's been around that energy long enough to know, okay, this is an execution. This was Johan, right? So I think Johan made it really quite clear for Tenma as well. So this is the point I'm making about the trail that he's leaving for Tenma, right? He wants Tenma to see all of this. And before I move on to some of the other points, it's really quite clear. I do want to say that, of course, Johan certainly recognizes and understands that sheer evil, it does exist. It does exist within this world, right? He's seen it clearly. He's experienced it, right? And, this again kind of goes back to that idea of seeing a darkness even blacker, right? So, that's saying something. That is saying something, Johan saying that is saying something, right? So this just kind of makes this whole idea of his potential childhood, again, before even Kinderheim 511, that much more fascinating and compelling. But I think, even outside of the actual room itself, the place the Red Hindenburg gets executed in, Johan actually going to the red light district, there's some interesting moments there. First of all, you see he sticks out like a sore thumb, of course, the pretty boy, again, the first reaction is that, okay, this might be someone that's kind of lost, or, someone that's a first timer. You see some of them immediately try to latch on to him, but you see once he goes into the dark alley, right? And that's quite the sight, isn't it? A dark alley within the red light district, right? So even in the red light district, there's this hierarchy, right? And, it's nothing new, this idea of the younger women being front and center. And then, of course, I see the ones that are discarded for, a number of reasons, I suppose. The reasons, I suppose, are clear, but yeah, there's a hierarchy there. But, Johan walking through that dark alley, it just felt like he's, I don't know, he's just a part of it. He didn't feel out of place there, did he? I thought that's really quite, I don't know, to me it felt really quite clear that, this is Johan in his element, right? You would think in a dark alley, within the red light district, any normal person is probably going to be a little bit, on edge. Now, as far as him actually approaching them, after he leaves, yes, at the most basic level, you could maybe say, okay, yeah, alibi, right? He wants to kind of have this exchange so they maybe remember him, right? If they can remember him. You see the balloon lady is just in the state of depression, essentially, right? It's strange. It's just so strange. Why balloons in a place like this? That's why I kind of, really felt like I'm going through the halls of someone's dark mind, even. But I think the one that really stands out most is him actually going back to the lady asking for drug money, essentially, and he obliges. He gives her, I'm going to go ahead and assume, more than enough to potentially overdose, right? And I think, unfortunately, and it really is quite sad, I'm probably going to go ahead and assume that she is going to end up overdosing. So, to me, it kind of felt like it's this idea of the freedom to make choices, even if they are bad ones and risky ones, right? Kind of trying to look at it from Johan's perspective. Johan giving her that type of money, that amount of money, it's essentially fueling her addiction, isn't it? And fanning the flames of this potential self-destructive overdose. And listen, it's not just him giving her money. He specifies, buy drugs with this money, But yeah, again, at the most basic level, maybe you could go back to that idea of having an alibi, right? Maybe this lady doesn't overdose, but she is going to remember, oh yeah, that's the guy who really helped me out at a moment of need. But again, at the end of the day, she still has to decide. She still has to choose for herself. She could go and buy food with that money or something else. And yes, I know looking at it from an addict's perspective, that's it's a tough choice to make perhaps, but I'm trying to look at it from Johan's perspective, that he must be thinking, there's a choice to be made here. But then going back to the other side of it, it's Johan, right? And there's this notion of Johan extracting the inherent darkness that's within people, that is present within all people. And again, on the B-side story, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the value of life, right? Are all lives equal? Is it something inherent? Is it something given? Is it something that can be taken away? These are some of the questions that Urasawa has asked throughout this anime. But yeah, I think that should do it for this one, folks. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access or timer-based full length or full opacity, consider checking out the Patreon page and potentially supporting the channel as well in the process. There's links in the description and the pinned comment, also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for episode 35. Until then, take it easy.